How can you tell someone is an exemplary person? In other words, how can you tell someone is the right person to imitate? That someone is the right company to identify with closely? Let's face it honestly, imitation is natural to life. Now, let me tell you a story about a young girl who grew up in a very poor family. The day she went to high school, she started to see certain girls her age appear and look like they were beautiful. They had all of life in order. When she joined their company, she heard them speak of life and speak of the future with such hope and anticipation, and life was bubbling in them. And she began to admire them and drew closer and closer to them. She wanted to be like them and not be associated with poor girl from a poor family. In a matter of months, she came down with syphilis, gonorrhea, HIV, AIDS, and she was pregnant. That is a typical example of imitation gone wrong. And we see it in many places, though the story seems to be an extreme, but that is a common thing everywhere in the world. Now, spiritually speaking, she was not the only one who was in trouble because she imitated. In fact, those whom she imitated were already in a state of spiritual disaster, unless they repented and turned to God. Now, that's not the only example of imitation gone wrong. I once visited a well-known pastor while I was a teen. I was not even a growing Christian at that point. Surprisingly, he was watching an American TV preacher. I didn't know much about theology, so I couldn't discern. But this pastor said he really admires this preacher. He admires the style of his speaking. He admires his dressing. He admires the fact that this pastor balances the issue of wealth and poverty in his life and in his teaching. He admires the positivity that this preacher sends out through his messages and speaking. Then I got to discover this TV preacher also had a jet. Then on social media, I found many admire this preacher and preachers like this. Oh yeah, when they have jets, they admire their brand of clothes, their brand of shoes. They admire them so much. And like, yes, preachers too should live like that. Hey, yeah. That's my preacher. That's my prophet. That's my man of God. Because of the worldly appearance, all right, and their style. Okay. Many other young ministers are aspiring to be like this kind of people. In their country, in their continent, they want to be like those kinds. We will ride in a jet too, through using the gospel and using the Bible. That's the aspiration of many. But God is concerned with who you choose to imitate. As a result, God has an advice for us. And that advice is a commandment as well. If you love God and love your relationship with God, do not take this commandment lightly. Let us read what it says in Philippians chapter 3 verse 17. It says, "Brothers, join in imitating me and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example that you have in us." So my question again, how can you tell the right person to imitate? My answer, if their example is like that of Paul. Our text says, brothers, join to imitate me. In other words, come together. Agree, brothers, to imitate Paul. Now, I want you to note that Paul is not addressing the men only or the boys only. But when he uses the word brothers, he's using it in a generic sense, referring to the family born in Christendom. More about that in a separate video. If you are especially a lady and you are so concerned that this word brother is used to refer to ladies as well. Now, back to our question. How do you join those who are imitating Paul? Who are the others that you join them? Paul continues in the verse saying, keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have on us. So do something, be diligent. Keep your eyes, be deliberate. I am going to be looking out for those who walk like Paul because I want to follow their example. I need an example to follow. And God says, keep an eye on those who walk like Paul. It's a commandment, it's an instruction, it's an advice. There's no option. Now, how do you know among the Christians professing faith in Jesus, who the people are who walk according to the example of Paul. Now, check out their lifestyle. Paul says those who live this lifestyle like we do. So check out their lifestyle. Check out their character. Do not just check out their words, their teaching, their doctrine. Yes, their teaching, their doctrine may bless you, may encourage you. Great. But check out their lifestyle. So important. Because even Apostle Paul acknowledges that some people who are jealous can go and preach the gospel and win souls. But Paul will not say, imitate the jealous people. Even Jesus Christ said in Matthew 23, the hypocrites who are leading the temple teach the doctrines of Moses right, but do not follow their example. Those are not the people to be your example. So check out the lifestyle of those you want to associate closely with by using the example of the life of Apostle Paul. So again, not just their words, check out their lifestyle. In 1 Timothy 4:16, Paul told Timothy this: watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Paul is so concerned about lifestyle. The evidence of the power of the cross is seen in our lifestyle. The evidence of the power of the cross is not seen in our words. It's not seen in our intellectual ability to understand all theological doctrines. It's not seen in our rhetorical ability to articulate doctrine well. The evidence is found in a lifestyle. That's where the power of the cross shows itself. And if the power of the cross has taken hold of you, if Jesus has come in your life and your lifestyle hasn't changed from hate to love, it hasn't changed from hate to love, no matter what changes has happened in your lifestyle, please recognize those changes are artificial. A natural change will happen when you can see, I have moved from hate completely to love completely, and my disposition is towards love. I am constrained by love. I am a slave of love. Not love according to the world, but love according to how God wants it to be. Now, in many churches, when they say, watch out your life and doctrine, when they say, watch out your life, they want to watch out about sexual immorality. You see how sexual immorality has put down many pastors. Watch out about that. Some are like, watch out about those who drink alcohol. Watch out about those who visit places where they sell alcohol and drink in bars. Watch out about those. In some other places, watch out about your dressing, how you dress. Watch out, be very careful about your dressing, the style of dressing. And then magnify those. Yeah, of course. Everyone who is a Christian needs to be careful about these things. But as Jesus said, you leave the most important issues and focus on the least important issues. You spit out a tiny little fly and swallow a camel. What about a lifestyle of justice, of mercy, of truthfulness in all things? A lifestyle of faithfulness to God in all things that God has said. What about such a lifestyle? Why is that not put front and center before the church? That there is a lifestyle that is prime. There's a lifestyle that has to be front and center. And every other lifestyle has to follow, has to toe the line. Why shouldn't that be? And I know when you put the main thing, the rest of the things about how you drink, whether you drink, what you dress, will follow. But when you put these other things at the forefront, oh people, you have given room for the devil to give you his own kind of righteousness, which is hypocritical righteousness. Let us look at Paul. When Paul says, watch your life, what is he talking about? So before you start saying, oh, sexual immorality, look at Paul when he talks about watch your life. Many times, what is Paul talking about? In that same context of 1 Timothy 4, where we read from verse number 12. Remember, we saw verse number 16, which said, watch your life and doctrine, so that both go together. But watch your life came first. Now in verse number 12 of that same chapter, Paul enumerates a few things for Timothy to be an example of, which I think Timothy should be watching his life to make sure he is an example of this to the people. Verse number 12 says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Not only that, in Philippians, when Paul says, follow the example that you find in us, as we saw in that Philippians 3:17. And the us that Paul is referring to is him, is Timothy. It's people like Epaphroditus, his teammate. The people with whom he went around planting churches, nurturing churches, preaching the gospel. And we find that example in chapter 2, verse 19 to 30. What is great and exemplary about that example? They were a people who put the interests of the church, the interests of Christ, above their personal interests. They had no bias, no bit of segregation in them, in their thoughts, for no reason. Jews and Gentiles receive equal treatment before them. That's how they did. That's how they went about. And they will suffer. Even Apostle Paul, instead of dying to gain heaven, will want to live to bring more joy to the people and to help them grow in the faith. That is the kind of example. Paul is saying, watch your life for these things. That is what Paul is saying, look for. Is there the element of purity in sexual relationships and so on? Yes. But you see where purity comes if you put the list? First of all, speech, love, faith. And that is coming down back there. Not because it is insignificant. But Paul doesn't want to reverse these things. And the church has reversed them. And you have many people in hypocrisy. Now let me give you some of the encounters I have had. Because I look to obey this passage. And I have been trying to obey as much as I can. When Paul says, join those who imitate me. Intentionally, you see people of faith who are imitating Paul, join them. Go after them. But how do you even know them unless you are attempting to join, unless you're attempting to relate with them when they are in your circle one way or the other? I've emailed pastors personally to encourage them. I found their emails online. I've emailed them to encourage them. Some of them have shared my videos with them in my email or spoken about it. And I'll be encouraging them. Why? Because I hear their messages. They minister to me. They minister to others. I'm a fellow minister. And I'm like, you know, as fellow ministers, we sometimes need encouragement. Encourage these people. Sometimes the subject they're talking about is church unity, which I have dealt a lot with. And I'm blessed because I'm like, see the testimony. It rhymes what they say, what I see, how we look at scriptures. It's wonderful. And I've seen some of them being attacked for preaching about church unity. The way they preach, exegeting scriptures properly. And I write to them. But guess what? No response from any of them. At my workplace, I've encountered people who had a need that only the local church could meet such need well. And I asked about their local church. They told me about their local church. I Googled it there. I decided to call their local churches, tell the need of the person I met, and how the local church can then get in contact with them with the client's permission. And guess what? Even though I explained who I am, what I am doing, how I got in touch with this person, and what I have seen about them as a church, which is wonderful, and how they can minister to this person, I receive no response. Maybe they end up helping those people. I don't know. But I receive no reply. I one day met a friend, and the friend took me to his church. He was a poor folk. I went to their church, and I was wonderfully blessed by the fellowship among poor people. Because among those poor people, there was no visible manifestation of the least difference between white and black, great or small, man or woman. It was a wonderful fellowship of believers. I was so blessed. My friend introduced me to some of the leaders who were greeting us at the door. And when they introduced us, all the leaders were so happy to see me and to know what I do. And they wanted me to come volunteer with them and help, because they say many of these poor folks come. We are short of people to manage the Bible study groups. We are short of people to bring encouragement and counseling to some of them and to build their lives. And I was excited. I said, yeah, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to come. Great. Then I asked to be introduced to the pastor. I was introduced to the pastor. We greeted, and the pastor reminded me. He said something on the pulpit, and he reminded me about it before I left. He reminded me about how, he lives every day just waiting for Jesus to come the next hour. He lives just waiting for Jesus to come the next day. That's why, as he is, when he preaches and is ending his sermon on Sunday, he reminds his people, if they don't see him next Sunday, he's going to be with Jesus. It's them. If they are not ready for Jesus, it's them. When he said things like that, I felt like, oh, wow, what a wonderful man who has the hope of Christianity ahead, right before his eyeballs all the time. And he is ready to so bless the people of God with the things of God. So I emailed this pastor, tried to communicate with him, no response. After I left, I sought for his YouTube channel. I went there, I communicated, I gave encouragements. I did everything I could from a distance to try to relate with him. Because how can I just jump and start coming to church and try to volunteer to help when I am not in good terms with the leader? He will not respond to me. What do you think was going on? I was introduced to him. He surely felt, oh, I need to protect my fame and position in this place. Here I am, the most praised here. This guy comes here, other people are going to start to see somebody else is there other than me. I may be wrong, but that is the impression that such an attitude leaves on the mind of someone like me, who saw an opportunity to bless the needy with my own gift and talents, who saw an opportunity to assist a fellow minister for no pay, but for no pay on earth, but for a heavenly pay someday, to bless his church, to help his church grow in the right way. But what am I saying? Look at the claim, look at his doctrine, look at his claim about Jesus is all right, but look at his lifestyle. Check out the online presentation of many ministers. If they are the ministers I've talked to, check out their online presentation. Great sermons, great preaching, great mission statement, great vision statement. The things they do, you see how they present themselves to be loving, to be a family people, to be a concerned people, a hospitable people. That's how they present themselves. That is their doctrine. Watch your life. But their life is a different story. Their life is a different testimony. I cannot be a friend of those kind of Christians. I cannot be a friend of those kind of ministers. They are not imitating Apostle Paul. That is not a kind of lifestyle that Paul wants us to have. And so I'm not going to go and find all ways to imitate those kind of pastors just because I too need some place to preach. I need some people to like me. I need some people to affirm me. No. I need to join those who imitate Paul for the sake of my relationship with Jesus Christ. So they are not like Paul. They are liars, they are pretenders. They are the reason the testimony of the church continues to be weak in this world. They are the reason the church continues to be divided. I mean the true church, I don't even mean the church of false doctrine. The church that carries true doctrine, they are the reason the church that carries true doctrine continues to be divided. They are the reason many are leaving the church, looking for a good Samaritan outside there to follow and to imitate. They are the reason those who leave the church are going after the doctrine of the good Samaritan. When the church should have won into their midst the good Samaritan and polished the doctrine of the good Samaritan. Now I hope you understand that I'm using the good Samaritan here as a metaphor of a very good person, well recognized for his goodness, but who has a corrupt understanding of who God is. Now remember, to know who to follow. And to know who to follow, who to imitate in your life, God says, choose the lifestyle of Apostle Paul as your standard. Use Apostle Paul's lifestyle and standard to now choose those you will draw closer to, those you will make company. Don't choose according to your tribe. Don't choose according to your bloodline. Don't choose according to your class. Don't choose according to the way this world chooses. Look at the example of Apostle Paul, and wherever you see it, whoever you see it in, make efforts to draw closer. Get closer. Watch, see, pick lessons. Let us pick lessons from one another. Draw closer shamelessly, and the Lord's Spirit will work spiritual growth in our lives.